Hi, I'm Mike, owner of the Ingram in Phoenix, Arizona. So exciting news. I find it exciting. You guys might say to yourself, what the hell? It's the same thing over and over and over again, but it's really not. Universal has announced that they are reissuing the Beach Boys' Pet Sounds in a couple of different ways. They're doing a Vinylphile series. The Vinylphile is their audiophile label. It's kind of their equivalent of a Rhino Hi-Fi. And they're doing it as a mono and a stereo mix. It's like a twofer, a gatefold, one disc mono, one disc stereo. They've also announced that they're doing their DSS one-step version of it, but this is a lot different than the Vinylphile. So the Vinylphile is actually made from what is probably a safety tape at this point. They're calling it a assembled production master, but they're not calling it a master tape. I think it's pretty well known out there. You've heard a lot on forums and in the past that the master tape for Pet Sounds is probably gone. Nobody's seen it in a long, long time. They're working with tapes. That probably goes for the Analog Productions copy. It's probably a safety tape or what they're now considering a master because they're using it as a master. And probably very likely what was being used for the DCC back in the 90s. That's what they're using for the Vinylphile. The difference is you've got Joe at Sterling, Joe Nino Hernandez, doing the mastering at Sterling for the new Vinylphile series. But then simultaneously they're doing this DSS one-step, and that is an actual one-step, but that is cut from the 1972 or there around about reprise master. That is the so in the 70s, the Beach Boys started their own label called Brother Records, and Brother Records was their label. They went back and they remastered Pet Sounds at the time for the very first time, and it was done a little bit different. It was EQ'd a little different. They used that mastering for the original twofer, so Carl and the Passion, So Tough, and that mastering found its way into some other early reprise pressings of it. And that has kind of been the master that's been loved for a lot of years. A lot of people have talked about that being the best version of Pet Sounds in mono. The thing with that is, there's not a lot of information around this, and kind of it's assumed that, okay, so when Pet Sounds came out, not a lot of people loved it. Besides Brian, the Beach Boys weren't really thrilled about it because it wasn't the surfing cartoons that made them a lot of money and gave them a lot of hits beforehand. Capitol wasn't in love with it because the whole idea, kind of the concept of an album, wasn't really that much of a thing yet. Brian was spending inordinate amounts of time in the studio. He was coming out with very elaborate stuff. Capitol was more of like, we need hit singles, the concept of an album being an album and not really that dark side of the moon mentality of we're going to make a record that's a record and not make you singles. That really wasn't a thing, and that's not really what Capitol was looking for. And they actually were working on Pet Sounds really, really late until it came out. So the thinking is that it was kind of rushed, and then when the Beach Boys took over control of some of their catalog, including Pet Sounds, it was tweaked in a way that was what they originally wanted, Brian originally wanted, but never really had the time to complete. So that's kind of the thought process and why the brother version of it sounds so good. So for the one-step version, they are using that brother tape. Now that's an EQ master. So that is essentially what Brian put together back in the day. They went back more than likely in 1970, 71, 72, whenever he got that tape and sent it to Artisan, but it was an EQ tape. He more than likely at that point had the original Capitol master, right? So what probably happened is they took the original, now this is guesswork, there's a lot of speculation in this, there's no definitive information on a lot of this stuff, but more than likely what happened is they took that original master tape, spent the time with it and EQ'd it in the way they liked, and that became their version, the reprise version. Subsequently, Pet Sounds has become bigger and bigger and bigger as the years have gone on and become now considered a masterpiece. Top 10 greatest album of all time. That wasn't the case in the 60s. In the 60s, it was, and in the 70s, it took time to obtain the cult status that it has now as a masterpiece. But that tape, who knows? It was probably used to death. What ended up happening to it, I don't know. Nobody knows this kind of stuff. Sometimes things go missing and then the labels kind of commandeer tapes as the new master. You know what I mean? Because that is, I guess you can be a little bit wordsmithy with master tape. Is it the master tape that was used to cut the record back in the day? The original mix down from the multi-tracks? Or was it the master tape we're using now? Because that's the best generational tape available. So I was perusing online a little bit today, and I normally don't do this before making a video, but the consensus is I'm going to get the Vinylphile. The Vinylphile is the way to go. It's a mono and a stereo. The stereo, of course, is digital. It always has been. They might be cutting it from a tape backup, but Mark in the 90s did a tape, or he took the original multi-tracks and synced the stems and made a stereo mix, which was never done back in the day. Brian wasn't really interested in stereo. He was deaf in one ear. Stereo didn't really resonate for him. He only had one ear to hear from, right? So they made a stereo. So the Vinylphile is a mono mix using that production master and the stereo mix from the 90s. I'm a fan of that stereo mix. I did a shootout on Pet Sounds years ago, and that was actually my preferred version of it because it cleared up a lot of vocal issues I found in the original. But the original is not a great sounding record. I have a beautiful minty original just sitting back there in the shrink with the original price tag. It's not that great sounding of a record. And I mentioned that in my original shootout video that's almost 10 years old at this point. It's not a great sounding record. And I kind of preferred the mono. But I'm really interested in what's going to happen with this DSS one step because we're now getting what many people consider the definitive version of Pet Sounds. We're getting a record mastered from that tape. Now, this was done by Chris Bellman, so it's really kind of similar to the I'm having Buckingham Nicks flashbacks where we had two separate masters going on simultaneously. But in this case, it's a little different because it's two separate tapes. We're using probably a safety-ish tape for the Vinylphile, and we're using the 70-ish brother mastering. And I keep using the word ish a lot because there's a lot, again, unknowns. So this is two separate tape sources mastered by two separate people. So how is this going to pan out? I'm not really sure, but I am looking forward to the DSS because, no offense against Joe, but we've got Kevin Gray more than likely already cut a record from this exact same tape. And just, if you guys got enough Kevin Gray records, dollars for donuts, is that the way that saying goes? I don't know, but you know what the hell I'm getting at. I'm not looking to spend a lot of money to find out how somebody else masters the same record and how it sounds compared to Kevin Gray, because I've done that many, many times in the past, and it's always the Kevin Gray. So generally I just save my money and I go with the Kevin Gray, and then I'm like, that's the one, because it almost always is the one. I've had very few times where it's not the case, but if you were a betting man and you were forced to put a bet on it, you're going to take the Kevin Gray bet, right? I mean, I think so. Most of you watching, that's just what it is. Now, you might say, well, you don't sell the Vinylphile on your website and you're selling this DSS on your website, so you're biased. I mean, I'm not biased because I haven't heard it. I don't know. The Vinylphile might be the greatest record out ever of all time. It might sound like Hugh Masekela's Xanaloft Productions' Hope. It might sound like that. Probably not, but it might. I don't know. I do have a test pressing of the DSS on the way. I am really curious to hear what it sounds like. I will report honestly back to you guys. But they're doing 6,000 of them. The Vinylphile actually comes out May 15th. The DSS comes out May 8th, so it is coming out sooner. But I think all things considered, I think I'm really looking forward to hearing what the DSS sounds like. Because again, this is an EQ'd, this is the Brian Wilson preferred version of the record, more than likely. It was their label. And Chris Bellman didn't EQ the EQ tape. They liked it, they listened to it, they putzed around with it. I talked to these guys that were involved in making this. They putzed around with it, tried a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and they ended up going in the end with exactly the way the tape was EQ'd originally. They felt like that was the best sounding version of it. So we are now essentially getting a much, much higher quality version of the original Carl and the Passion So Tough mastering that everybody's loved. But now we're getting it on much, much higher quality vinyl. So yeah, that is the story of the new upcoming Beach Boys Pet Sounds. Again, a record that people are, oh my God, do I need another version of it? Well, it is, again, considered one of the top 10 greatest records of all time. And this, the DSS, is not a rehash. This is a new idea. This is a newly found tape, presumed to be the original Brother Master, which when I talked to the people involved, said sounds different than anything else that they've ever compared it against. You know what I mean? It sounds different than that original 66 tape. So this is going to be fun. I myself will get the Vinylphile. I will, of course, get the DSS. I've got a test pressing coming, but I'll get an actual physical copy. I've got about this many Pet Sounds in my collection. I've done a shootout on it. I'm all about doing it again. One of my favorite albums of all time. Probably listen to it 3 times a year to this day. I've heard it probably a couple hundred times, but when I did the shootout video alone, I heard it 50 times. But minimum, I've heard the album a couple hundred times, and I listen to it to this day 2, 3, 4 times a year. It's a masterpiece. It really is. I love the Beach Boys. The very first concert I ever saw my entire life, I was 10 years old, was the Beach Boys. I got to see Brian Wilson live. You know, he was there. He was on the piano. He didn't do much, but I got to see him. It's an iconic band. And this is an iconic album I love the Beach Boys, and this is great. And a lot of people are casual Beach Boy fans. Pet Sounds is the record for them, but I'm a huge Beach Boys fan. And I mean, even when you get into that 70s stuff, it's a lot better than people give it credit for. It's quite good. I was listening to an interview with John Stamos and Bill Maher. They were talking about the Beach Boys on Bill Maher's podcast. And they were talking about the Beatles quality versus the Beach Boys quality. And John Stamos made a comment that I thought about. I'm like, you know what? That's true. He goes, maybe you can't compare the whole Beatles catalog against the whole Beach Boys catalog. But he's like, I'll put the 40 best Beach Boys songs against the 40 best Beatles songs. And maybe the number's not 40, maybe it's 30, maybe it's 20. But put the best 20 or 30 Beach Boys songs against the Beatles songs. And I think I don't know if you could say that one band was definitively better than the other based on that. Now, if we pull back a little bit, it's a different story. But on this album alone, God Only Knows and Wouldn't It Be Nice are 2 of the greatest songs of all time. They're masterpieces. Paul McCartney himself has said it. The Beatles themselves adored this record. So I'm a fan of getting it in this new context, this new light. So I really hope it sounds as good as I'm anticipating it sounding. I think it's going to be a home run. I don't know yet, but I'm paying the money to find out. Like I said, I'm getting the test pricing, but I'm going to buy it because I got to have the nice colored box on my shelf. But I'm going to find out, but I'm going to still have the Vinylphile. But it's nice because we're now going to have the Analog Productions version that Kevin Gray did is out of print. You can't get it anymore. So again, people having access to an affordable analog copy of a record is never a bad thing. I'm not thrilled that I don't get to sell it, but I'm all for it. Having it in the marketplace, because again, a lot of people that are into vinyl today were not into vinyl 10, 15 years ago when that record came out and you could get it easily and cheap. So now they can. And now you have another option with the DSS. They're doing 6,000 of them. It's not for everybody, but yeah, I'm stoked about this. I really am. So I'll give you guys a little bit more of an update when I have them all in my hands and I could shoot them all out and do a shootout maybe again. All right, guys. Again, the DSS can be bought online at theingroove.com. Until next time.